I was recently asked on Facebook, is there any new information concerning nail anatomy? Well, there is. Unfortunately, the internet is filled with confusing and competing misinformation about nail anatomy. I've been on a multi-year quest to determine all the facts, but finding them has been pretty difficult. Many doctors and scientists are also confused by the various schools of thought. To get to the root of the issue, I've worked with many world-class medical experts and internationally known nail educators, in addition to reviewing dozens of scientific reports and books. I'd like to explain some of this new information in hopes of ending the confusion. In this episode, I'll be relying on the third revision of my nail cross-section diagram that's also found in the books Face to Face with Doug Schoon. Now, it's agreed that the proximal nail fold with the initials PNF, it can be talked about either way, proximal nail fold, PNF, it's the entire flap of skin that covers the matrix. It extends from the edge of the visible nail plate all the way back to the first joint of the finger. Now, there is some confusion though and disagreement about the Epinequium. I've researched all sides of this debate, and I hope this information will clear up this confusion as well. Epinequium literally means upon the nail. This is a tissue that covers the new growth of nail plate. Why is there so much confusion about the location of the Epinequium? Here's why. Strangely, in some medical literature, another type of tissue is also identified as Epinequium, which creates a lot of confusion. Of course, it's confusing to have two different types of tissue having the same name. The Epinequium creates the cuticle, and it covers the new growth of nail plate. This other tissue does not. So, to avoid this confusion, we should only refer to the Epinequium as the underside portion of the proximal nail fold, the part that covers the new growth of nail plate and creates the cuticle. Now, the Epinequium is surprisingly thin. It's approximately 0.1 to 0.15 millimeters thick, which is only about 5/1000ths of an inch. And it contains only one layer of special cells called stem cells. Researchers believe this thin layer contains these specialized stem cells, which are like factory cells. They're designed to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, continuously creating ever more cuticle tissue. The Epinequium extends from the nail matrix to the front edge of the proximal nail fold, but it's all underneath the proximal nail fold. Now, there's only one type of cuticle tissue. That's the thin, colorless layer of dead tissue that adheres to the nail plate. This tissue comes entirely from the Epinequium. The cuticle becomes strongly adhered to the nail plate while it's still located underneath the proximal nail fold. The cuticle then pulls away and continues to ride on the upper surface of the nail plate as the nail plate grows outward. It's important to understand that the cuticle tissue comes from the underside of the proximal nail fold. For clarity, in my diagram, I've labeled this area as the location of stem cells in the Epinequium layer. Not surprisingly, the nail matrix also contains stem cells, but their job is to continuously make new nail plate cells. Another interesting part of the proximal nail fold is the area where this living tissue meets the nail plate. Unfortunately, many still confuse this area with the cuticle. It's not, so please avoid making this error. Here's why some are confused. The outer layer of the proximal nail fold is covered with a tissue called stratum corneum, which is typical of other parts of the body as well. The area where the skin meets the nail plate has a different appearance because its surface has become keratinized. In other words, just the outer layers located at or near the surface of the proximal nail fold undergoes a process that causes the surface cells to produce more keratin. This keratinization process hardens the outer surface of the PNF, which is, again, short for proximal nail fold. This gives a slightly different appearance. Like protective armor, this hardened surface layer creates a protective shield that can resist attack by harmful infectious organisms and potentially harmful chemicals. The keratinized proximal nail fold remains relatively thin area. In other words, it's very thin, and you probably wouldn't notice this keratinization until the proximal nail fold is chemically attacked or physically abraded, cut, or injured. Then the surface becomes much thicker and harder. Why? Well, this is the proximal nail fold's way of building up greater protection against further abuse or injury. The PNF hardened skin surface is not the cuticle. It's not cuticle tissue. Cuticle is much softer and much stickier and has superior adhesion to the nail plate. The cuticle and the keratinized PNF surface layer are made by different types of tissue that are found in different locations. These tissues serve different functions, so please don't confuse them. The cuticle forms an important seal between the proximal nail fold and the nail plate, preventing infectious organisms from getting underneath the skin to infect the matrix or the bone. The keratinized proximal nail fold surface layer helps provide extra protection to the front edge of the PNF. So, in short, the Epinequium is a thin layer containing stem cells that lines the bottom of the proximal nail fold. And the proximal nail fold is the correct name for the flap of skin that covers both the nail matrix and the nail plate. Cuticle tissue is created by stem cells located within the Epinequium on the underside of the PNF. Now also note, the nail plate sits on top of the nail bed. So it's an error to say that nail polish is applied to the nail bed. Instead, it's applied to the nail plate. Remember, the proximal nail fold is not the cuticle. The cuticle tissue is an important barrier seal between the PNF and the nail plate that helps keep bacteria out of the nail matrix area. An infection in the matrix area could lead to permanently damaged nail plates or bone infections, which could lead to the loss of the finger or, of course, the toe. Cutting and overly aggressive manicuring or pedicuring this area can break this tissue and allow bacteria to penetrate to cause the nail to become infected. That's why it's so important to carefully manicure or pedicure these areas. Carefully remove any loose tags of dead skin. That's acceptable, as long as the living skin is not torn or damaged further by this removal process. Even so, nail technicians should not intentionally abrade or cut intact skin from around the nail plate. Some might mistakenly believe that since it's keratinized, it must be dead and not harmful to cut, but that is incorrect. Whether living or dead isn't the issue. Can cutting or abrading cause skin infections or allergies? Yes, that's the real issue. The underlying tissue contains microscopic capillaries, which are often broken when the PNF tissue is cut or abraded by a knee file. Infectious organisms can now gain access and enter the skin through this damaged tissue, leading to a potentially serious infection. Also, allergic reactions to artificial nail products are much more likely when repeatedly exposed to the damaged, cut, or abraded skin. It is not in the client's best interest to intentionally cut or abrade away portions of the proximal nail fold. Please help clear up the confusion and share this information widely. Be sure to know the difference between these terms and use them properly. Teach your clients and other nail professionals the truth. It's about time for the confusion to end. It's critical for everyone to know and teach the facts. You can find a copy of my cross-section and an explanatory text that follows along with what we talked about today at my website, www.dougschoon.com. Please check it out. Feel free to copy it, use it in your class, share it with your friends, email it to them. Let's work together to end the confusion.